3, 2011, the Jewish Chronicle announced the discovery of dozens of lead books from Jordan.
Hidden in a remote cave in Jordan, dozens of tiny lead books were found, 70 fragile volumes filled with cryptic symbols and ancient writings. Could these artifacts be older than the earliest biblical texts? What stories do they hold about humanity's past? Scholars are only beginning to unravel their secrets, but one thing is certain: these small books have the potential to reshape how we think about religion, life, and our place in the universe. 70 small ancient books, each no larger than a credit card and made entirely of lead and copper, might be rewriting the story of early Christianity. These extraordinary codices, bound by metal rings and covered in intricate symbols and inscriptions, are believed to date back to the 1st century. Carbon dating of a leather fragment found alongside them confirms it's over 2,000 years old. Experts are calling this find potentially more significant than the famed Dead Sea Scrolls. The text, written in an archaic form of Hebrew script mixed with coded symbols, is rich with ancient messianic imagery. Among the depictions are menorahs, fruiting palm trees, and references to the Feast of Tabernacles, offering tantalizing glimpses into the lives and beliefs of early Christian communities. But these artifacts come with their share of controversy. An Israeli Bedouin claims the books, which he smuggled into Israel, have been in his family for generations, supposedly discovered by his great-grandfather. Now, a fierce legal and ethical battle rages between authorities, archaeologists, and the Bedouin family over the rightful ownership and origins of these precious items. David Elkington, leader of the British research team examining the codices, expressed his awe in a statement: "It's an enormous privilege to share this discovery with the world. To think these might have been held by the earliest saints of the Church, it's utterly breathtaking." Already, preliminary studies have uncovered depictions and symbols that may reference the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. If authenticated, these tiny books could rival the significance of the Dead Sea Scrolls, offering invaluable insights not only for Christians, but for anyone curious about the roots of one of the world's most influential religions. The purpose of the books remains a mystery, but they do mention Jesus and someone named Simon. This Simon could be the one who helped Jesus carry the cross on his way to be killed. Or it could be another Simon who led a big rebellion against the Roman Empire much later, around 135 AD. This clue makes historians believe these books are incredibly old, possibly thousands of years old. These fascinating finds even have their own dedicated page on the internet, a Wikipedia entry. They're called codices, which is just a special word for an ancient book. Some experts even think they might be missing parts from a special book in the Bible called Revelation, because they have religious symbols and names, and a good number of them are still sealed shut. The discovery site itself is a hidden cave in Jordan. This area has a history of hiding important things from the past. Christians went there to escape trouble after their city, Jerusalem, was destroyed in 70 AD. Before these books, archaeologists had found things like tablets, other old objects, scrolls, and even a fancy incense burner. No one expected to find a whole new kind of artifact that could change what we know about the Bible. Archaeologists recently uncovered a set of miniature books unlike anything they, or anyone else, had ever seen. Crafted from metal, their covers bore intricate images of palm trees and 7-branch candle holders, powerful symbols in the Jewish faith. The text inside was written in Paleo-Hebrew, a language spoken thousands of years before Jesus' time, alongside Aramaic, the common tongue of the era when Jesus lived. This intriguing blend of languages hinted that the books weren't created all at once, but were compiled over centuries. Despite the challenge of deciphering these ancient texts, researchers pressed on. They even discovered some passages written in Greek, further complicating their work. After days of meticulous study, a breakthrough came from Dr. Samuel Zinner, a scholar who spotted unusual Hebrew letters laid out in a grid. These letters could be read in multiple directions, sideways, vertically, and even diagonally. This grid-like layout turned out to be the key that allowed the team to decode parts of the enigmatic writings. As they continued their investigation, more symbols associated with Judaism came to light: the 7-branched lampstand, a temple offering bowl, 8-pointed stars, and a slanted cross. However, the most shocking discovery was a depiction of Jesus, the earliest known image of him. The portrait showed Jesus wearing a crown of thorns, with an inscription nearby that read, "Savior of Israel." Scholars were stunned. Could this image have been created by someone who had actually seen Jesus? One particularly puzzling element was the detailed rendering of the seven-branched lampstand, or menorah. In Jewish tradition, this sacred object was kept in the temple's holiest section and was only seen by the high priest. It was forbidden to depict the lampstand, raising the question, how did the artist see it? Researchers speculated that the inclusion of such a sacred, forbidden image might explain why these books were hidden. They contained secrets that weren't meant to be shared. David Elkington, who helped bring the books to public attention, called them a monumental find for Christianity. He suggested they might even predate the Apostle Paul's writings, making them some of the earliest Christian artifacts ever discovered. The thought of holding objects that early Christians may have touched captured his imagination and inspired awe. Not everyone shared Elkington's enthusiasm. Skeptics, especially authorities in Jordan, where the books were found, dismissed them as forgeries. They pointed to similar lead books sold as trinkets or online collectibles. Some even mocked the discovery, claiming the books were stumbled upon by a random wanderer in a cave. To settle the matter, researchers knew they needed definitive proof. All 70 books would undergo rigorous testing to determine whether they were genuine artifacts from the first century or elaborate fakes designed to deceive. The stakes were enormous. If authentic, these books could rewrite history. If not, they would join the ranks of clever forgeries that continue to baffle and intrigue the world. The tiny books were almost dismissed entirely when a group of 9 determined scholars stepped in to save them. Worried that this rare find wouldn't get the attention it deserved, the team decided to take matters into their own hands and verify whether the books were real. This independent group had no connection to David Elkington, the man claiming ownership of the books. Instead, it included retired Bible scholars, experts in ancient metals, and specialists in old languages, people uniquely qualified to tackle the mystery. Led by retired Hebrew professor Robert Hayward, they set out to uncover the truth. The first step was to figure out the age of the metal. If the lead was genuinely ancient, it would mean the writing on it likely was too. One key test involved checking for radiation. As Professor Webb explained, lead has a naturally occurring radioactive element that fades over time. However, after 1945, when atomic bomb testing began, radioactive particles in the atmosphere could recharge lead with detectable traces. If these books had no radioactive residue, they would be confirmed as older than anything made after 1945. When the results came in, they were stunning. No traces of radiation were found. This meant the lead in the books wasn't modern. Further tests at the University of Surrey provided more evidence. Analysis of the metal showed it was consistent with ancient Roman lead, further supporting the idea that these books were over 1,800 years old. What made the findings even more compelling was the unique quality of the lead itself. Unlike modern, purified lead, the metal in these books was full of impurities and much more brittle. Microscopic analysis revealed tiny crystals and small holes in the lead, features that only develop after centuries. The evidence was overwhelming. These books were not modern creations, but artifacts from the distant past, likely dating back to the early Christian era. With their authenticity confirmed, the books became an incredible resource for understanding the lives and beliefs of early Christians. But new questions emerged. Why had these intricate books been made? What role did they serve in a world so long ago? Even though the books were confirmed to be ancient, their purpose remains a mystery. Why did early Christians create these tiny codices? And what message were they trying to share or hide? The fact that many of the books are sealed shut only deepens the puzzle. Why go through the effort of writing something down if no one was meant to read it? Some researchers think the books weren't made for reading at all. Instead, they might have been talismans, objects believed to offer protection or bring good luck. The way they're bound, with rings securing the pages on all sides, supports this idea. Then there's the writing itself. Some of the letters suggest a style from after 135 AD, but that doesn't mean the content isn't much older. These could easily be copies of texts passed down over many generations, preserving stories or teachings from a time long before they were written here. The imagery in the books is just as fascinating. Professor Philip Davies from Sheffield University couldn't stop thinking about one particular image. It showed a cross in the foreground with what looked like Jesus' tomb behind it. There was also a small building with an opening, and in the distance, what seemed to be city walls. Comparing these details to other drawings of Jerusalem, Davies concluded the scene likely depicted a crucifixion outside the city, a core moment in Christian history. But as scholars dive deeper into what these books mean, there's growing worry about their future. Some fear that parts of the collection could be sold off on the black market, or worse, destroyed entirely. That hasn't stopped researchers from moving forward, though. Dr. Margaret Barker, a former president of the Society for Old Testament Study, sees a potential link between these codices and the sealed book mentioned in the book of Revelation, a book that could only be opened by the Messiah. She also points to other ancient writings that mention secret teachings passed from Jesus to his closest followers. Barker believes these books might reflect a Hebrew Christian tradition and could give us a rare glimpse into the beliefs of the earliest Christians. If that's true, they could change how we understand this critical period of history. David Elkington agrees and has emphasized how crucial it is to preserve the collection as a whole. He believes these books deserve to be studied and shared with the world. For now, many researchers believe the books were meant as a kind of testimony, physical evidence of the Messiah's words and deeds. The symbols and images seem to be crafted to communicate their message to both their contemporaries and future generations. Some of the writing even talks about freedom from Roman taxes and the coming of a messianic king who would bring peace and justice to his people. For those living under Roman rule, these were powerful ideas of hope and liberation. Throughout history, other metallic books have surfaced, some proven fake, others found to be real. But these tiny lead codices are unlike anything else. The big question still remains, what secrets do they hold inside their sealed pages? Whatever the answer, they've already sparked a renewed interest in understanding the early Christian world and the stories it has yet to tell. Dr. Margaret Barker, a respected scholar of ancient texts, has been delving into the mysteries of the tiny lead books discovered in Jordan. Despite significant corrosion on many pages, some sections remain legible, offering invaluable insights into the lives and beliefs of their creators. These books were not inscribed in the usual way but cast with raised letters and symbols, making their contents permanent. Any mistake would have required recasting an entire page, suggesting these are either original works or incredibly precise reproductions created with great care. The illustrations are equally intriguing. One page, called the Oracle page, depicts a menorah with leaves sprouting from its base, while another, the Bee page, shows a stylized bee. Dr. Barker and her colleague, Dr. Samuel Zinner, discovered that some characters were arranged in clusters or triangular patterns rather than straight lines. These patterns often mirrored each other, reflecting the paired structure of creation described in ancient texts, such as the writings of Ben Sira. Barker believes these patterns encode the worldview of priests exiled from Solomon's temple, preserving their sacred knowledge and hope for the future. The lead books also reveal an unexpected connection to metalworking. The original temple priests were likely skilled in this craft, as reflected in the frequent use of metalworking terms in Hebrew scripture. Phrases like, "I will smelt away your dross," Isaiah 125, and "He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver," Malachi 3:3, are examples of this metaphorical language. Even the word seraph, often associated with celestial beings, can also mean smelter. This connection is further seen in Isaiah 6:6, where a seraph touches the prophet's lips with a hot coal, a symbolic act linked to the fire and refinement of metalworking. Dr. Barker sees these books as more than relics. They are a testament to the resilience of an ancient priesthood, preserving sacred traditions in exile and embedding their wisdom into intricate patterns and symbols. The lead books offer an extraordinary window into the spiritual and cultural life of early religious communities, bridging the gap between ancient practices and modern understanding. The text delves into the role of metalworkers in ancient religious traditions, particularly in crafting sacred objects like the golden calf, the tabernacle furnishings, and temple items such as the menorah, ark, and table for showbread. In Zechariah 1:18-21, metalworkers, referred to as horsum, are also linked to magic or silence, motifs echoed in the oracle page of the lead books. The writings on the tablets connect to King Josiah's 7th century BCE reforms, described in 2 Chronicles, and the prophecies of Jeremiah. Jeremiah's visions included an almond branch, symbolizing God's watchful protection, and a boiling pot, possibly linked to metalworking and the refining of impurities. God's words to Josiah, "I have made you an assayer and tester," liken him to a refiner, attempting to purify the people's wickedness, much like the stubborn qualities of unrefined lead. Dr. Margaret Barker highlights complex features of the lead books, such as archaic letters paired with modern Hebrew equivalents and symbols with multiple meanings. Some pages include patterns of letters that face different directions, converging around a central menorah, a symbol of the Lord. These patterns reveal deep theological meanings, with representations of the Lord and Messiah embedded within the designs. The tablets reflect a fusion of sacred symbolism, craftsmanship, and hidden messages, preserving the worldview of their creators, while offering scholars a rich, intricate puzzle to decode. The tiny lead books remain an extraordinary window into the ancient world, blending faith, craftsmanship, and mystery. They provide invaluable insights into the spiritual practices, traditions, and struggles of early religious communities, particularly those connected to the priesthood and metalworking. Their intricate patterns, layered symbols, and encoded messages suggest a profound effort to preserve sacred knowledge during times of upheaval. As scholars like Dr. Margaret Barker and her team continue to decode their secrets, the books challenge modern understanding of ancient traditions, linking the material and spiritual worlds in unexpected ways. Whether as testimonies of faith, tools of divine symbolism, or reflections of a culture grappling with change, these tiny books offer a unique glimpse into the hopes, beliefs, and creativity of their creators. Their discovery not only deepens our appreciation of history, but also underscores the enduring human drive to record and protect what is most sacred.
Hidden within the annals of ancient writings lies a trove of stories shrouded in mystery. Texts that whisper across the centuries, bearing the weight of wisdom and wonder. Among these revered works is the enigmatic Book of Daniel, a cornerstone of sacred literature. Yet, nestled within its folds is a lesser-known and often overlooked treasure: the additions to Daniel. What truths or secrets have been obscured by the passage of time? What layers of intrigue surround the enigmatic tale of Bel and the dragon? Step into the shadows of history with us as we delve into the additions to the Book of Daniel, a journey to uncover mysteries hidden for millennia. In the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's rule over Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, the powerful king of Babylon, marched into Jerusalem and seized control of the city. The sacred treasures from the temple were plundered and carried off to Babylon, along with King Jehoiakim himself. It's said that God permitted this to happen, allowing Babylon to dominate Judah. Once back in Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar commanded his chief official, Ashpenaz, to select young captives from Jerusalem's nobility, youths with no physical flaws, sharp intellects, and the wisdom to be molded into servants for the royal court. Among those chosen were 4 remarkable young men: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These young men were enrolled in an intense 3-year program where they learned Babylonian language, literature, and customs. Their education was lavishly supported. Nebuchadnezzar himself ordered that they be fed the finest food and wine from his table to ensure they were strong and healthy. Yet, Daniel resolved not to defile himself by indulging in the rich royal diet, which went against his beliefs. With humility and tact, he approached the palace steward, asking permission to eat simpler fare. Daniel's integrity had already won him favor with the steward, but even so, the official hesitated, worried that the king would punish him if Daniel and his friends appeared less robust than their peers. Daniel proposed a solution. For 10 days, he and his friends would eat only vegetables and drink water. At the end of the trial, their health would be compared to that of the others. Reluctantly, the steward agreed. For 10 days, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah stayed true to their simple diet. When the steward examined them afterward, he was astonished. They looked healthier and more vibrant than the others who had feasted on the king's luxuries. Their steady diet of vegetables and water was allowed to continue, and they thrived. God blessed these 4 young men with extraordinary abilities. Their knowledge, wisdom, and understanding surpassed all expectations. Daniel, in particular, was given the rare gift of interpreting dreams and visions, setting him apart even further. When the 3 years of training ended, the youths were brought before King Nebuchadnezzar. The king himself tested them, engaging them in discussions and challenging their intellect. None of the other trainees could compare to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The king found their wisdom and insight so profound that they outshone even his most experienced magicians and sorcerers. From that day, these young men stood in high regard in the Babylonian court, their brilliance unmatched. Daniel, especially, continued to serve faithfully, his wisdom enduring through the reigns of many kings, even into the time of King Cyrus. In the 2nd year of his reign, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream so disturbing it shook him to his core. He couldn't sleep, couldn't think, and couldn't let it go. Desperate for answers, he summoned his advisors, magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and Chaldeans, and demanded they interpret the dream. But he didn't stop there. He insisted they first tell him what he had dreamt, not just its meaning. The room fell silent. The advisors were stunned. "Tell us the dream, and we'll interpret it," they begged. But Nebuchadnezzar wasn't having it. He accused them of stalling, even scheming, and doubled down. If they couldn't tell him the dream and its meaning, they would be executed. On the other hand, if they succeeded, they'd be richly rewarded and showered with honor. The Chaldeans tried again, pleading with the king. "No king has ever asked this of anyone," they said. "Only the gods could reveal such a thing, and they don't live among us mortals." Their words only made the king angrier. Feeling betrayed by their failure, he ordered the execution of all the wise men in Babylon, a sentence that included Daniel and his friends. When Daniel heard about the king's decree, he didn't panic. Instead, he approached Arioch, the captain of the guard, with a calm but urgent question. "Why is the king's command so harsh?" Arioch explained what had happened, and Daniel asked to speak to the king. Once before Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel requested more time, promising he would uncover the mystery. Returning home, Daniel shared the gravity of the situation with his companions, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and urged them to pray. Together, they cried out to God, asking for mercy and wisdom to reveal the dream. That night, Daniel received a vision, and the mystery was made clear. When he woke, Daniel's heart overflowed with gratitude. He praised God, declaring, "You are the one who changes times and seasons, who raises up kings and brings them down. You reveal the hidden things, and wisdom belongs to you." With confidence, Daniel approached Arioch, saying, "Take me to the king. I know the dream and its meaning." Before Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel humbly admitted, "No wise man, magician, or sorcerer could ever do what you've asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has shown you what's to come." Daniel began to recount the dream. "You saw a massive statue, brilliant and terrifying. Its head was made of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet a mix of iron and clay. Then a stone cut without human hands struck the statue's feet, shattering them. The entire statue crumbled to dust, blown away by the wind, leaving no trace. But the stone grew into a mountain, filling the whole earth. As Nebuchadnezzar listened, Daniel explained the meaning. "You, O king, are the head of gold, a mighty and glorious kingdom. After you, other kingdoms will rise, each inferior to the last. The silver represents the next, the bronze another, and the iron a kingdom of unmatched strength. But the feet, mixed with iron and clay, show a kingdom that will be divided, partly strong, partly weak. Its people will be fragmented, unable to fully unite, like iron and clay that can't mix. But here's the most important part. During the reign of those kings, the God of heaven will establish a kingdom that will never fall. It will crush all others and stand forever. The stone in your dream represents this divine kingdom, created by God, not by human hands. It will fill the earth, unshakable and eternal." Nebuchadnezzar was stunned. He fell to the ground in awe of Daniel and his God. "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings," he declared. "He has revealed to you what no one else could." Grateful and impressed, the king showered Daniel with rewards. He appointed him as governor over Babylon and chief of all the wise men in the kingdom. At Daniel's request, his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were also given important positions, while Daniel remained in the royal court, trusted and favored by the king. The prayer of the courageous trio in the fire. 3 young men stood in the heart of a blazing furnace, surrounded by flames meant to destroy them. Yet, they weren't afraid. Instead, they lifted their voices in prayer and praise, declaring their trust in God. As the fire roared, Azariah spoke with conviction, his words echoing against the walls of the furnace. "Blessed are you, Lord, the God of our ancestors," he prayed. "Your name is glorious forever. Everything you do is just, every decision you make is right, and your judgments are true." Azariah didn't shy away from acknowledging the mistakes of his people. He confessed how they had strayed, disobeying God's commands and breaking the covenant. Their suffering, he said, was a consequence of those choices. Yet, even as he admitted their failures, his voice was steady with hope. "Do not turn away from us, Lord," he pleaded. "Remember your promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, how you swore to make their descendants as countless as the stars and as abundant as the sand by the sea. Even though we've fallen short, we ask for your mercy. Don't leave us to be forgotten." Though they had no temple or sacrifices to offer, Azariah and his companions knew that what mattered most was the sincerity of their hearts. "We come before you with humble spirits and genuine faith," he said. "We have no rams or bulls to give, but we offer our devotion. Let it be pleasing to you, Lord." As they prayed, the furnace burned hotter than ever, so fierce that even the guards outside were consumed by its flames. But inside, something extraordinary happened. The angel of the Lord appeared with them, surrounding the young men with peace. The fire couldn't touch them. The heat vanished, replaced by a cool, gentle breeze. Together, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael began to sing, "Blessed are you, Lord, God of our ancestors. Your name is holy, and your glory fills the heavens. You sit above all, enthroned on the cherubim, and your greatness lasts forever. All creation belongs to you, and everything sings of your praise." Their song became a call to all of creation. "Let the sun, the moon, and the stars praise the Lord. Let the winds and rain, the fire and frost, the mountains and rivers, and everything that lives on earth bless his name. Even the smallest creature gives him glory. Let Israel and all who serve the Lord join in thanksgiving, lifting their voices to honor him. His mercy lasts forever. They rejoiced in their deliverance. Give thanks to the Lord, for he has saved us from death. Let Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael sing of his kindness, for he has rescued us from the flames. Let everyone who trusts in him give thanks, for his mercy never ends. The flames that were meant to destroy them became a stage for their faith. God had turned their trial into a moment of triumph, showing his power to protect and his mercy to save. As their praises rang out, the fiery furnace became a sanctuary of hope and a testimony to the enduring greatness of God. The wicked plot against Susanna. In the bustling city of Babylon, Joachim was a man of influence and wealth, known for his generosity and wisdom. His home was a gathering place for the Jewish community, partly because of the serene, sprawling garden that surrounded it. His wife, Susanna, was the jewel of his household, a woman of striking beauty and unwavering faith, raised in righteousness by parents who had instilled in her the teachings of God's law. That same year, 2 elders were appointed as judges. Though their titles commanded respect, their hearts were corrupt. They used their position as a shield for their dark desires, preying on the vulnerable under the guise of authority. These men frequented Joachim's house, ostensibly to fulfill their duties, but their true reason was far more sinister. Both had become infatuated with Susanna. Day by day, the elders let their desire for Susanna consume them. They watched her whenever she walked through the garden, hiding their longing behind veils of politeness. At first, they kept their thoughts to themselves, but their obsession grew too strong to bear in silence. One afternoon, they crossed paths in the garden, their shared fixation finally spoken aloud. "I can't stop thinking about her," one admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. The other, emboldened by the confession, nodded in agreement. From that moment, they conspired together, scheming to trap Susanna in her own sanctuary. One hot afternoon, Susanna decided to bathe in the privacy of the garden. She asked her 2 maids to bring her oil and washing supplies and to close the garden doors, ensuring no one could enter. The maids obeyed and left, their footsteps fading as they exited through a side door. The elders, who had been hiding among the trees, seized their chance. They emerged, their faces twisted with lust and menace. "The garden doors are closed, Susanna," one said, his voice low and menacing. "No one can see us, and we desire you. If you refuse, we'll claim we saw you here with a young lover. Everyone will believe us, and you'll be ruined." Susanna froze, her mind racing as she weighed the impossible choices before her. To yield would mean betraying her faith and her God. To refuse would risk her life and her honor. Her voice shook as she finally replied, "I will not sin against the Lord, even if it costs me everything." One of the elders ran to the garden door and flung it open, creating a scene to make their lies seem plausible. Hearing the commotion, Joachim's servants rushed in, alarmed by Susanna's cries. The elders wasted no time spinning their story. "We caught her in the act," they shouted, pointing at Susanna with accusing fingers. "She was here with a young man who fled when we approached." The servants looked at Susanna in disbelief. How could such a virtuous woman be guilty of such a thing? But the elders' words carried weight, and suspicion began to spread. The next day, the community gathered to hear the charges. Joachim stood at the center of the crowd, his face marked with confusion and pain, as the elders demanded that Susanna be brought forward. Her family accompanied her, parents, children, and relatives, all shocked and dismayed by the accusation. Susanna stood quietly, her head held high despite the storm of whispers and judgment around her. Susanna stood in the midst of the assembly, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. Her modesty and grace, once celebrated, now seemed to make her a target. The crowd watched as the two elders, cloaked in false piety, stepped forward to accuse her. "Uncover her face," they demanded. The assembly complied, revealing her tear-streaked expression. Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd, and many wept at the sight of her distress. The elders began their tale, carefully crafted to frame her. While walking in Joachim's garden, we saw her meeting with a young man. They were embracing, but when we confronted them, the man fled. She is guilty of betrayal and dishonor. Susanna, her voice trembling but firm, refused to yield to their lies. "I have done no such thing," she said, her eyes meeting the crowd's. But their words carried weight, and doubt crept into the assembly. With no evidence but the testimony of these two judges, the crowd condemned Susanna to death. As the verdict fell, Susanna lifted her face to the heavens. "O eternal God," she prayed, her voice breaking with anguish, "you know everything. You see their wickedness and their lies. Do not let me die for a crime I did not commit." Her words reached beyond the crowd, and the Lord heard her plea. Just as the sentence was about to be carried out, a young man stepped forward. "I will not allow this injustice," Daniel declared, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. The people turned to him, startled by his boldness. "Are you all so quick to condemn an innocent woman without a proper investigation?" he demanded. "Return to the place of judgment, and let this matter be re-examined. Justice cannot rest on lies." The assembly, moved by Daniel's courage and wisdom, agreed to his request. Back at the place of judgment, Daniel called for the two elders to be separated for questioning. To the first, he asked, "If you truly saw Susanna with a man, tell me, under which tree did you see them together?" The elder answered confidently, "Under the mastic tree." Daniel fixed him with a piercing stare. "You have lied," he said, his voice steady. "The angel of God has received his command to cut you in two." He then turned to the second elder. "Now, you, under which tree did you witness this act?" The man hesitated, but then replied, "Under a large oak tree." Daniel's expression hardened. "You too have lied. The angel of God waits to strike you down for your deceit." The crowd erupted in outrage as the truth unraveled. The elders, once respected, were now exposed as liars and manipulators. Praise filled the air for the God who protects the innocent and sees all hidden things. Following the laws of Moses, the punishment the elders had planned for Susanna was turned back on them. Their lives ended that day, a grim reminder of the consequences of bearing false witness. As for Daniel, his wisdom and integrity became the talk of the city. People admired the young man who had dared to stand against injustice and who had revealed the truth with such clarity. From that day forward, Daniel's reputation as a man of God and a defender of the innocent only grew, a beacon of hope and righteousness in a world often clouded by corruption. Long ago, in the days when empires rose and fell and faith was tested by fire, Daniel took a stand that would echo through the ages. After the death of King Ahasuerus, Cyrus of Persia ascended the throne, inheriting the mighty kingdom of Babylon. Among his advisors, none was more esteemed than Daniel, a man of wisdom, integrity, and unwavering faith in the living God. At that time, the people of Babylon worshipped a grand idol called Bel. Bel was the centerpiece of their devotion, and its temple was filled daily with extravagant offerings: 12 measures of fine flour, 40 sheep, and 6 vessels of wine. Even King Cyrus, despite his wisdom, bowed before Bel, believing it to be a living god. But Daniel, true to his faith, refused to follow the crowd. When the king questioned Daniel about his defiance, Daniel spoke plainly, his voice steady with conviction. "Your Majesty, I cannot worship something crafted by human hands. I serve the living God, the creator of heaven and earth, who rules over all life." The king, intrigued but skeptical, challenged Daniel. "Do you mean to say Bel is not alive? Look at the offerings it receives daily. Surely only a living God could consume so much?" Daniel smiled, unfazed. "Do not be deceived by appearances, Your Majesty. Bel is nothing but clay and brass. It neither eats nor drinks. The offerings are consumed by men, not gods." Cyrus, frustrated by Daniel's words, summoned Bel's priests to defend the idol's honor. "Tell me," he demanded, "who consumes the food placed before Bel? If you cannot prove it is Bel, you will die. But if Bel truly eats the offerings, Daniel will pay for his blasphemy." The priests, confident in their scheme, assured the king of Bel's divinity. They proposed a test. The king would prepare a feast for Bel, seal the temple door with his royal signet, and return the next day to witness the offerings gone. Proof of Bel's power. The king agreed, as did Daniel, who had his own plan. As the priests departed, Daniel instructed the king to allow his servants to scatter ashes across the floor of the temple before sealing it. The king consented, and the task was completed before they both left, locking the door with the royal seal. That night, as the city slept, the priests crept into the temple through a secret passage beneath the altar. With their families in tow, they devoured the food and drank the wine, leaving the table empty for the king's inspection. At dawn, Cyrus and Daniel returned. The king examined the seals on the temple door and found them intact. Overjoyed, he opened the door and saw the table bare. "Behold the power of Bel," he exclaimed, ready to praise the idol. But Daniel stopped him. "Wait, Your Majesty. Before you enter, look closely at the floor." The king peered down and saw footprints, many footprints, imprinted in the ashes. There were traces of men, women, and children. His face darkened with realization. "What is this?" he thundered. The priests were summoned and confronted. Faced with the evidence, they confessed their deceit. Furious at their betrayal, the king ordered their execution and the destruction of their families. The secret passage was sealed, and the priests' treachery was laid bare for all to see. With the priests punished, Cyrus turned his attention to the idol itself. "Bel is yours to do with as you please," he told Daniel. Daniel wasted no time. He ordered the idol to be dismantled and its temple razed to the ground, ensuring that no trace of its falsehood would remain. In ancient Babylon, there was a fearsome dragon that the people revered as a deity. Towering and imposing, the creature appeared alive. It ate, drank, and inspired awe. The king, curious about Daniel's steadfast faith, challenged him, asking, "Surely you must believe in the divinity of this dragon?" But Daniel, unwavering in his belief in the living God, refused. "I do not worship idols or creatures, no matter how grand," he said calmly. "Let me prove to you that this dragon is no god at all." Intrigued by Daniel's confidence, the king allowed him to proceed. Daniel devised a clever plan. He combined pitch, fat, and hair into heavy lumps and fed them to the dragon. The concoction was deadly, and soon after consuming it, the dragon burst apart, destroyed from within. Daniel stood before the stunned crowd and declared, "This dragon is no god. The true God is the living creator of all things, the one who rules over heaven and earth." The people of Babylon, however, were not so easily swayed. Furious at the destruction of their idol and the challenge to their beliefs, they turned their anger toward the king. Whispers of rebellion spread through the city. The people accused the king of betraying their gods, having already witnessed the fall of the idol Bel, and now the destruction of their revered dragon. Owing to the mounting pressure, the king reluctantly handed Daniel over to the mob. Daniel was thrown into a den of ravenous lions, a pit designed for execution and despair. 7 lions prowled within, typically fed daily with carcasses and sheep to keep them satisfied. For 6 long days, Daniel remained in the den, but the lions, miraculously, did not harm him. Meanwhile, far away, the prophet Habakkuk was preparing food for workers in the fields when an angel of the Lord appeared. Grasping Habakkuk by the hair, the angel transported him to Babylon in an instant. Stunned, Habakkuk found himself before the lion's den, where he called out to Daniel. "Daniel, God has sent you this meal," he cried. Overwhelmed by the miraculous intervention, Daniel gave thanks. "You have not forgotten me, O Lord. You are faithful to those who love and seek you." He ate the meal and was strengthened, while the lions remained docile around him. The angel then returned Habakkuk to his fields as swiftly as he had come. On the 7th day, the king went to the den to mourn for Daniel, expecting to find only remains. To his shock, Daniel was alive, sitting unharmed among the lions. The king shouted in amazement, "Truly, Daniel's God is the living God. There is no one like him." Moved by the miracle, the king ordered Daniel to be lifted out of the den. As for those who had plotted against him, they were thrown into the pit in his place, and the lions devoured them instantly. The story of Daniel's encounter with the dragon and his deliverance from the lions highlights themes of faith, courage, and divine intervention. Daniel's unwavering trust in God not only exposed the futility of idol worship, but also revealed God's power to protect and vindicate his faithful servants. These tales, including those of Susanna, Bel, and the dragon, and Daniel in the lion's den, offer rich insights into God's justice and the triumph of truth over falsehood. They paint a vivid picture of how faith, even in the face of death, can lead to miraculous deliverance and a testament to God's greatness. What do you think of these accounts? Do they deepen your understanding of faith and God's power? Share your thoughts below.
"90% of the Old Testament's been removed, and about 50% of the New Testament's been removed."
Could there be truths intentionally left out of the Bible? These questions have led many researchers and believers to delve into forgotten texts and hidden knowledge, uncovering revelations that are both shocking and intriguing. Among the most debated is the Book of Judith, a text shrouded in controversy and the focus of countless debates and conspiracies for centuries. Though it highlights God's presence and heroic deeds, its exclusion from the modern Christian Bible often comes down to its content, which touches on themes like seduction. Many scholars question whether it was truly divinely inspired. But what exactly does the Book of Judith contain? Why is it so controversial? The Book of Judith is a deuterocanonical text included in the Septuagint and recognized by Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Christian traditions. However, it is absent from the Hebrew Bible and considered part of the Apocrypha. The book recounts the inspiring tale of Judith, a virtuous Jewish widow who uses her intelligence and beauty to kill a powerful enemy threatening her town, Bethulia. Her brave actions ultimately save Jerusalem from destruction. Judith's name, meaning praised or Jewish, reflects her connection to her people and her faith. The origins of the text's language remain unclear. Some scholars believe it was originally written in Hebrew or Aramaic, while others lean toward Greek. The oldest surviving version comes from the Greek Septuagint, but the abundance of Hebraisms in the text suggests a Semitic origin. Jerome, the translator of the Latin Vulgate, worked from an Aramaic manuscript, though he found parts of it difficult to interpret. As a result, his translation omitted sections he couldn't fully understand. Sadly, the Aramaic manuscript he referenced has since been lost. The authorship of the Book of Judith remains a mystery. While most agree the author was likely Jewish, there's no evidence it was ever considered authoritative or canonical by Jewish groups. It is not included in the Masoretic text, the Dead Sea Scrolls, or other early rabbinic literature. When Jerome translated the Hebrew Bible into Latin, he categorized Judith as part of the Apocrypha. Today, opinions about the book's authority differ widely. Many Orthodox churches accept it as scripture, but Protestant traditions reject it outright, adhering instead to the Jewish canon for their Old Testament. Martin Luther classified Judith as an allegory rather than scripture, including it in his Apocrypha, but not as part of the Bible. Within Anglicanism, the text is regarded as valuable for historical or moral lessons, but not suitable for establishing doctrine. The Book of Judith tells the story of a fearless and beautiful widow named Judith. Upset by her fellow Israelites' lack of faith in God's ability to rescue them from their enemies, Judith decides to act. Along with her maid, she sneaks into the camp of Holofernes, the enemy general leading the siege against her town, Bethulia. Judith wins Holofernes' trust by pretending to offer him valuable information about the Israelites. Over time, she earns access to his inner circle and his private tent. One night, when he's passed out drunk, Judith takes matters into her own hands. She kills him, takes his head back to her people, and inspires them to stand strong. Without their leader, the Assyrian army falls apart, and Israel is saved. Though many men sought her hand, Judith chooses to stay single for the rest of her life, devoted to her faith and her people. The Book of Judith is split into two main sections, chapters 1 through 7. This part sets the stage, focusing on the looming threat posed by King Nebuchadnezzar and his ruthless general, Holofernes. The Assyrians march west, eventually reaching the strategic town of Bethulia, which guards the route to Jerusalem. Chapters 8 to 16. The second half of the book is all about Judith. It highlights her courage and faith as she executes her daring plan to save her people. With the dramatic beheading of Holofernes as the climax, the shift from military action to Judith's personal story emphasizes her role as the hero and the key to Israel's survival. Many see the Book of Judith as a dramatic and fictionalized story that illustrates faith, courage, and divine intervention. Judith's bravery and cunning inspire her people to trust in God, turning what seemed like certain defeat into victory. From a storytelling perspective, the book is beautifully structured. Its two halves are designed to balance each other, with themes and events in the first part mirrored in the second. This symmetry reinforces the central idea: God's people can overcome any obstacle when they trust fully in Him. The first half of the book focuses on the conflict between Nebuchadnezzar's ambition and Israel's faith. Holofernes leads a massive army to punish the nations that refuse to support the king's campaign, including Israel. Bethulia becomes a critical battleground, as it blocks the path to Jerusalem. Despite warnings from Achior, an Ammonite who tells Holofernes that the Israelites cannot be defeated unless they abandon their God, the Assyrian general presses on. He cuts off Bethulia's water supply, leaving the town on the brink of surrender after 34 days of suffering. The people are ready to give up, even if it means submitting to Nebuchadnezzar and turning away from God. In a desperate move, Uzziah, Bethulia's leader, convinces the townspeople to hold on for 5 more days, hoping for God's intervention. This is when Judith steps in, refusing to wait passively for salvation. Her bold actions not only save Bethulia, but restore her people's faith in God. In the second half of the book of Judith, we meet the widow Judith, a deeply faithful and determined woman from Bethulia. She wastes no time making her presence felt, boldly challenging Uzziah's decision to give God a 5-day deadline for deliverance. For Judith, this compromise shows a lack of faith and arrogance in trying to dictate God's actions. From her introduction onward, Judith dominates the story, standing out as a figure of unwavering conviction. Judith calls Uzziah and the other town leaders, Shabri and Sharmis, to her home. There she rebukes them for overstepping their role, insisting that God is merely testing their faith and can save them whenever He chooses. She admonishes them with powerful words. Do not try to bind the purposes of the Lord our God, for God is not like a human being to be threatened or like a mere mortal to be won over by pleading. Judith 8:16. Her message is clear. Faith in God's power must remain absolute. As long as they stay true to Him, Israel will not be abandoned. Judith's speech leaves Uzziah impressed, and he admits she speaks with wisdom. However, the people's desperation from thirst clouds their faith. Hoping for immediate relief, the magistrates ask Judith to pray for rain to refill their water supply. Uzziah, attempting to deflect responsibility for the surrender vow, claims the people pressured him into it, an excuse echoing Jephthah's story in Judges 11. Judith, seeing the leaders falter, decides to take matters into her own hands. She boldly declares in chapter 8, 33-34, that God will deliver Israel through her actions before the 5 days are up. Refusing to explain her plan, she simply asks the leaders to meet her at the city gates that evening. After the leaders leave, Judith spends time in prayer, asking God for strength and guidance. She draws inspiration from Simeon, who avenged his sister Dinah in Genesis, and asks for the power to bring down the enemy through her actions. Her prayer is heartfelt and strategic, asking God to let her deceive the enemy with her words and bring about victory through her hands. Judith then dresses in her finest garments, enhancing her beauty to disarm and manipulate her foes. Accompanied by her maid, she heads to the enemy camp. At the Assyrian camp, Judith encounters soldiers on patrol and spins her first lie, claiming to be a Hebrew deserter. She tells them Israel is doomed and offers to help the Assyrians, piquing their interest. The soldiers, captivated by her beauty and eloquence, escort her to Holofernes' tent. In her meeting with Holofernes, Judith uses clever language, addressing him as Lord, while secretly referring to God. Her words and beauty completely win over the general. She promises to provide him with vital information about the Israelites, further gaining his trust. Enthralled, Holofernes pledges, "If you do as you have said, your God shall be my God, and you shall live in the palace of King Nebuchadnezzar." Judith 11:23. On the 5th night, after a lavish feast and heavy drinking, Holofernes falls into a deep drunken sleep. Alone with him in the tent, Judith prays for strength and precision. Using Holofernes' own sword, she strikes him twice, severing his head. She places the head in a bag carried by her maid, and the two women return to Bethulia under the cover of night. At dawn, Judith reveals Holofernes' head to the townspeople, proclaiming that God has delivered them. Her bold action reignites their courage. The Israelites launch a surprise attack on the Assyrians, who, upon discovering their leader's death, descend into chaos and retreat. After her courageous act, Judith's victory is celebrated with great joy and reverence. Achior, the Ammonite who had earlier warned Holofernes about the power of Israel's God, is brought before the severed head of the enemy general. Overcome with shock and awe, he faints but later converts to Judaism, publicly declaring his newfound faith. The Israelites seize the opportunity to plunder the abandoned Assyrian camp, collecting wealth and resources left behind. The high priest Joachim himself travels to Bethulia to honor Judith. Leading a triumphant procession to Jerusalem, the people gather to offer thanks and worship God. For 3 months, the city is filled with praise and celebration, marking the miraculous deliverance of Israel. Judith, however, returns to her quiet life in Bethulia. Despite her fame and the many suitors seeking her hand, she chooses to remain unmarried. She dedicates the rest of her life to her faith and community, living to the remarkable age of 105. Before her death, she distributes her wealth to her husband's family and grants her loyal maid freedom, leaving behind a legacy of generosity and devotion. Her story raises a lingering question. Why wasn't the Book of Judith included in the Bible, while a similar story, the Book of Esther, was accepted into the canon? Both Judith and Esther are celebrated heroines in Jewish history. Each risked everything to save her people, and their stories highlight themes of bravery, divine intervention, and deliverance. Yet only Esther's story was included in the Bible, while Judith's was not. Interestingly, Esther's inclusion was not without controversy. Her book is the only one in the Bible that does not explicitly mention God, which sparked debates among rabbis when the canon was being finalized. Despite this, the Book of Esther was accepted due to its popularity and its connection to the Jewish festival of Purim, which remains a cornerstone of Jewish tradition. In contrast, the Book of Judith explicitly credits God for the victory and concludes with a song of praise. However, it was excluded from the canon primarily because of doubts about its historical authenticity. Judith's story, while inspiring, is widely regarded by scholars as a work of historical fiction. The author carefully situates the tale in what appears to be a historical context, but includes glaring inconsistencies. For example, Nebuchadnezzar is described as the king of Assyria, even though Assyria had fallen a year earlier, and Nebuchadnezzar was actually the king of Babylon. The city of Bethulia, central to the story, is described in vivid detail, yet there is no archaeological evidence that it ever existed. The book also blends elements from different cultures and time periods, using Babylonian, Greek, and Persian names and customs that do not align with the era it claims to represent. Compounding these issues are the numerous variations in ancient manuscripts of the text, which differ significantly and make it difficult to establish a definitive version of the story. While the events in Esther's story are also historically debated, there is no direct evidence disproving them. This perceived plausibility, combined with its cultural and religious significance, helped Esther's story gain acceptance into the canon, whereas Judith's did not. Despite its exclusion from the Bible, the Book of Judith remains a powerful narrative. Her story continues to inspire, reminding readers of the strength that comes from unwavering faith and courage. Judith's actions not only saved her people, but also established her as a timeless symbol of resilience and leadership. Even though the Book of Judith didn't make it into the Bible, its core message remains powerful. Trust God during tough times, and understand that God can choose anyone, male or female, to carry out His will. This idea was radical in ancient times and, sadly, still challenges some religious traditions today. When the scriptures were being canonized, Historical accuracy was a major deciding factor. Judith's story, with its many inconsistencies, ultimately didn't meet the criteria. However, the book was so well-loved and influential that it was given a place in the Apocrypha, maintaining its special status among religious texts. The Book of Judith isn't just a story of faith and courage. It's also a lightning rod for debate. Certain parts of the narrative don't sit well with traditional Christian beliefs, drawing both criticism and controversy. One of the most hotly debated aspects is Judith's use of lies. She is likely the only figure in biblical history who explicitly asks God to help her lie. In Judith 9:10 and 9:13, she prays for God to make her words deceitful so she can outwit her enemies. Her goal is clear: protect Israel at all costs. But her method, lying, has raised eyebrows. This creates an ethical dilemma. On one hand, her actions lead to salvation for her people. On the other, deceit is generally condemned in Scripture, and Judith's reliance on it is hard for many to reconcile with biblical values. Another point of contention is Judith's use of her beauty to manipulate Holofernes. While some view her actions as a clever strategy in desperate times, others believe they cross a moral line. For example, in chapters 11:16 and 11:19, Judith tells Holofernes she will pray to God to find out when the Israelites might sin so she can share this with him. But she never actually prays. Instead, she uses the opportunity to escape after killing him. Critics argue that this not only involves deceit, but also misuses God's name, making it seem as though her lies are divinely sanctioned. Despite these issues, the Book of Judith hasn't been forgotten. While Protestants generally reject it as part of the Bible, it holds an important place in other traditions. The Roman Catholic Church embraced it as scripture centuries ago, with councils like Trent formally declaring it part of the canon in 1546. The Eastern Orthodox Church also recognizes Judith as inspired, and she's venerated as a saint in Catholicism, especially in places like Prussia and Germany. Judith's story is celebrated in Catholicism for showcasing an incredible woman of faith and courage. She's seen as one of the strongest women in the Old Testament, someone who trusted God completely and took bold action to protect her people. The backdrop for Judith's story is one of struggle and oppression. The Jewish people had returned from exile, but freedom was still out of reach. They lived under the control of Persia and faced constant threats from foreign powers. It was a time of fear and uncertainty, where faith and survival were deeply intertwined. Judith steps into this chaos as a figure of extraordinary strength. Her faith is unshakable, even when the leaders of her city begin to doubt. She doesn't hold back in challenging them, calling out their lack of trust in God's power. In one powerful moment, she asks them, "Who are you to put God to the test?" She reminds them that God isn't bound by their timelines or expectations and urges them to trust in His will. Judith's story is as much about faith as it is about action. Her deep trust in God drives everything she does, from the bold plan she sets in motion to the prayers she offers along the way. She risks her life, venturing into enemy territory with nothing but her wits, her faith, and the belief that God will see her through. What's striking is how she uses every tool at her disposal, her beauty, her intelligence, her courage, to accomplish her mission. She never wavers in her faith, even when surrounded by danger, and remains true to her principles. Judith's actions aren't just about saving her people. They're about showing what can happen when someone fully trusts in God, no matter how impossible the odds may seem. Judith's story has left a lasting impact, even beyond the pages of the Bible. For many, she represents the power of faith, prayer, and boldness in the face of overwhelming challenges. The Catholic Church views her as an example of what unwavering trust in God can achieve, and her story continues to inspire people today. While the Book of Judith may not be part of the modern Protestant Bible, its message still resonates. Judith reminds us that faith isn't just about waiting for deliverance. It's about stepping out in courage, trusting that God is with us every step of the way.